Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Árpad Szabó, and it's my honor to talk a little bit about Budapest and specific density issues of Budapest. In my lecture, I hope it's working.
It's there.
The other way. So it's working. I will be talking about density issues and density patterns of Budapest. In my lecture, I will not talk about benefits of density. Some of them will be, of course, explained in the lecture and in the brief. My lecture will basically have two parts. In the first part, I will talk about some of the most important density, so to say, patterns of the city, which I find really important to understand and explain a little bit in connection with the city. And then very shortly, it's the other way, and then very shortly I will present three examples or three projects. First of all, about density. Budapest, or Pest, the city of Pest developed, it's not working completely. So the city of Pest already developed from the late 19th century I will learn it at the end. So developed from the mid-19th century in a very quick pace, and as it shows, or it could be seen on some of these slides, its population started to grow very quickly from the mid-19th century, reaching a phase or reaching a state at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, that in the historic core of the city, relatively close to the city center, to the historic middle of the city, we have in a relatively small area almost 1 million people living. This area is more or less a 3-kilometer radius circle, and in this circle, in this area that we often refer to as the historic area, developed until let's say 1910s, we have a series of blocks, a series of urban formations with relatively high density. Some of these blocks already at this time, at the beginning of the 20th century, have a residential density over 1,000 people per hectare, about 22 blocks. And in about another 115 blocks, residential density is in between something like 500 and 800 people per hectare. Nevertheless, this thing still increased a little bit until the 1930s, when we see a situation in the city that we have a relatively small historic core, and in the areas just outside the historic core, mainly on the eastern side, we have an extremely high density with extremely highly developed and densely developed blocks in general. Of course, this density is a result of a specific typology, specific building typology, which is connected to this courtyard type of house that we all know probably very well in Eastern Europe or in Middle Europe, when the buildings are developed around the central courtyard and the building wings are built all the way around the plot borderlines of the plots. This whole pattern or residential typology has a lot of variations, a lot of different forms, also in a formal way, but in general we can say that they produce a relatively high density also at the level of built structures and also at the level of residential densities. Still, their former variety and also their status might be completely different at different parts of the city. So moving a little bit further, in the second part of the 20th century, starting from the 1930s, population starts to decrease quite rapidly. We see a situation that the city center, or the districts that we consider to be the city center, the 5 districts in the center of Budapest, have lost almost 50% of their population since the 1930s. Nevertheless, still today we see that the gross residential density of some of these areas are around 200-300 people per hectare. And just to understand a little bit of patterns of Budapest, I also would like to talk very, very shortly about spatial distribution of urban density in our city. If we look at the general overall residential density of the city, it's relatively low. It's not higher than, for example, Krakow or London. But if we look at density from a different point of view, and if we look at the spatial distribution of density, in the city of Budapest we see a situation that in this central core, in an area which is more or less a 3-kilometer radius circle in a reference to a central point, in this area we see a density which is comparable to the most dense cities of Europe, like for example Paris, Moscow or St. Petersburg, and density decreases very rapidly after this area. Of course, this is connected to the issue that this is where the transitory zone that we today usually refer to as the brownfields zone start, and this is the area that developed in a very dense way until the end or end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And even today we see a situation that although this building typology in the center only takes or uses 10% of the developable land, developable area of the city, it still hosts almost 1/3 of the total population of the city. If we move a little bit further and zoom a little bit more into the building typology and density figures of the city, I'm showing or very quickly presenting the results of a research that we did with the university students a few years ago. We see data that the floor space ratio of these blocks, of these traditional blocks, is somewhere between 0.6, 0.8. Floor space ratios are predominantly around 3, 3.5, but usually, the most typical one is between 2 and 4, sometimes reaching even 5.0 as a floor space ratio, and the most typical residential density is around 250, 300 people per hectare. In some blocks, some historically developed blocks, this residential density even reaches 500 people, which is a relatively high number. And if we look at this historical block, I think this whole lecture introduction wants to explain a little bit that in general there's a fear of density in the city center of the city, in the city center of Pest. Also because this very rigid and very much closed urban structure, spatial structure of this historic tissue creates a situation that we experience this spatial formation even denser than what it is because of its very closed sense. So in general, we usually say that in urban renewal or densification projects, we have to have the aim of, even if we want to keep the relatively high density, we have to have the aim of opening up or resolving the closed feeling or the closed notion of space in these redevelopment areas, which might mean resolving or opening up the interior of the blocks, urban blocks, or with other strategies, with other approaches, opening up the closed perimeter of the blocks. So 3 projects, very shortly, I would like to present. The 3 projects are, of course, a little bit different, but their main difference is their size. I will explain the importance of size later on. All 3 projects are connected to urban renewal areas or urban rehabilitation areas that were designated after the early 1990s, and the areas where even central governmental funds were more or less concentrated, or central governmental funds were available.
Projekty, alebo teda určite posledné 2, ktoré prezentoval pán architekt, sa vyvíjali v spolupráci mesta, alebo mestskej časti a súkromného investora. Mňa by zaujímalo, kto bol teda tým iniciátorom, či to bolo skôr mesto, alebo teda prišiel s iniciatívou skôr súkromný investor. A kto napríklad spracovával masterplán, kto bol zodpovedný, kto to financoval. V podstate trošku by som rád vedel o tej spolupráci mesta a súkromného investora v týchto projektoch. Ďakujem.
It's working? Well, it's actually a long story. Anyway, the whole project was initiated by this municipality-owned urban development company, this Rave 8. It's a municipality-owned company, but this formation of making an independent company, mainly with experts, made, of course, a lot of things possible. Initiation came from them, and the ultimate goal was, of course, to upgrade the district in general. Private investors were invited into the process later on. Actually, open tenders were made for these two projects, or for these two project areas. They are actually very close to each other. And the whole idea was that the local municipality prepares the land, makes the master plan or the zoning plan, creates kind of a framework plan for the whole area, and gives a possibility to investor to buy those specific plots that are, so to say, open for investment or development. From the money that the municipality gets from the investors, it can already actually create the plots in their physical sense, and also gets money that from that money can rehouse people that are still living in the area, in these rundown areas, and also can spend money on refurbishment of houses, of remaining houses in the close surrounding. And then the investor gets the possibility, based on, of course, the zoning plan prepared by the municipality, gets the possibility to build on the area, but also the investor was responsible for creating and building, for example, the public spaces of the area. Just very briefly, that's the outline.
Ďakujem. Je ešte ďalšia otázka? Áno, máme.
Dobrý deň, moje meno je Vladimír Sloboda, druhý zástupca starostu z Ružinova. My sme tu taká ružinovská enkláva, pretože naozaj nás sa zahusťovanie naozaj týka. Jednu otázku by som mal takú skôr kratšiu, skôr pre zaujímavosť, že čo vlastne bolo podnetom pre tú možnosť zahustenia Budapešti v tých období, v tom prelome 19. a 20. storočia, pretože predpokladám, že všetky tie pozemky a budovy boli súkromné a zrazu sa z toho stala taká hustá oblasť Budapešti, že či to bolo štátom nariadené, alebo naopak, akým spôsobom k tomu došlo, to možno len skôr v krátkosti, ale to, čo ma viacej zaujíma, je, akým spôsobom napríklad do tých troch projektov bola zapojená verejnosť, či mali možnosť sa do toho zapojiť ako diskusia, akým spôsobom ste sa vysporiadali prípadne s ich podnetmi, a čo z toho vzýšlo. A teraz taká tá tretia, ako dlho zhruba trvalo, kým ste sa dostali k tým masterplánom, že boli definitívne schválené. Ďakujem.
Ďakujeme. Zaujímavé otázky.
So, the first question, I think, if I understand, you were referring to the 19th century. End of the 19th century, there was no city incentive, basically. It was based on private investor speculation, the word that we usually use in reference to that. There were no laws. The first laws and bylaws actually decreasing density came into practice from the 1920s. That's one of the reasons why not so dense areas were developed later on. The other questions, if I will remember them well, the projects actually, the second project, the first project is basically it's an investment, it's a private investment. So maybe I would leave that a little bit out of the question. In the other two, the whole process took several years. In the second project, there were not, most of the plots were actually empty, and in the process of the zoning plan, preparation of the zoning plan, as far as I know, there was no special like community-based discussion, on the area. It was mainly initiated by the local government or this local municipality-owned office, and this involvement of the community came in later on with this process of this Football Street Partnership Program. The other project is a little bit more complicated. It actually took much more time. The first concepts for that area were drawn up already in the early 1990s. The zoning plan or the regulation plan that was also included in one of the slides was actually amended in 2001. The area was given over to the private investor in 2000. The first public tender was in 2003. Then the second public tender was successful, and the area was given over to private investor in 2004, 2005. And also then a discussion between the investor and the municipality started. Actually, if you could, had possibility to look at the slides carefully, the actual development is a little bit different than the original zoning plan, because some amendments had to be done. In this second part, in this third project, also there was some kind of an involvement of the local population. The thing is in a way quite strange, because it was a really rundown area, and almost practically everyone was very keen on being rehoused in another location, either in the districts or some other parts of the city. So this thing that we usually see in many situations, that local communities are very much connected or very much emotional about their environment, was not typical here. I don't know if I answered everything, maybe not.